First, that I'm going to be reading from this edition. This is a first edition of Captains Courageous by Rudyard Kipling. The first edition. I don't remember where I got it, but there it is. The weather door of the smoking room had been left open to the North Atlantic fog as the big liner rolled and lifted, whistling to warn the fishing fleet. "That chain, boys, the biggest nuisance aboard," said a man in a frieze overcoat, shutting the door with a bang. "He isn't wanted here, he's too fresh."
But was too weak to fit things together. A new smell filled his nostrils. Wet and clammy chills ran down his back, and he was helplessly full of salt water. When he opened his eyes, he perceived that he was... I just have to tighten now. He perceived that he was still on top of the sea, for it was running round him in silver-colored hills, and he was lying on a pile of
I don't care, said Harvey. I'm grateful enough for being saved and all that, of course, but I want you to understand that the sooner you take me back to New York,
I know the feeling. First time Dad laid me out was the last, and that was my first trip. Makes you feel sickish and lonesome, I know. It does, moaned Harvey. That man's either crazy or drunken.
Grizzle than that before we're done with you, young feller. And I don't think any worse for ye for anything that's gone by. You wasn't fairly responsible. Go right about your business and you won't take no hurt. "You're white," said Dan, as Harvey regained the deck, flushed to the tip of his ears.
Quick, Danny, my son, clean for me. Harvey moved forward at once. Here was something he could do for the man who had saved his life. Dan threw him a swab, and he leaned over the door, mopping up the slime clumsily.
"Let them say how many they've caught without checking them," said Harvey. "Why, yes. What's the sense of a man lying for a few old cod?" "Was a man once lied for his catch," Manuel put in. "Lied every day. 5, 10, 25 more fish than come, he say there was." "Where was that?" said Dan. "None of our folk."
And eye and heart, and sends you to breakfast ravening. They emptied a big tin dish of juicy fragments of fish, the blood ends the cook had collected overnight. They cleaned up the plates and pans of the elder mess who were out fishing, filled the lamps, sliced the pork for the midday meal, and swapped down the forecastle.
Stinging even through the nippers, the woolly circlets supposed to protect it. "He's a loggy. Give him room according to his strength," cried Dan. "I'll help ye." "No, ye won't," Harvey snapped as he hung onto the line. "It's my first fish."
Long towards sundown.
"Is it a whale?"
And twiddling the spigot to the scuttlebutt, saying, if 'twas a cow's bag, he's that much farmer. Well, Penn and they ran a farm up Exeter way. 'Twas. Uncle Salters, he sold it this spring to a jay from Boston, as wanted to build a summer house.
In Harvey's mind by the end of the rope itself. The lesson would have been easier had the deck been at all free, but there appeared to be a place on it for everything and anything except a man. Forward lay the windlass and its tackle, with the chain and hemp cables, all very unpleasant to trip
through the smother, her headsail banging wildly. The men waited and looked at the boys, who began fishing. Phew! Dan's lines twitched on the scored and scarred rail. Now, how in thunder did Dad know? "Help us here, Harv. It's a big un. Poke hook, too." They hauled together and landed a goggle-eyed 20-pound cod.
"Both are dropped," said Long Jack. "I wonder what mischief he's been in ashore." "He's a trawler," Dan explained to Harvey, "and he runs in for bait all along the coast. Oh no, not home, he don't go. He deals along the south and east shore up yonder." He nodded.
"Let go," said Gisco, though no one had hinted at picking them up. "I wouldn't have a match that belonged to Abishai aboard. Guess she run clear under. Must have been spewing her oakum for a week, and they never thought to pump her. That's one more boat gone along, leaving port, all hands drunk." "Glory be," said Long Jack. "We'd have been obliged to help them if they was top of water."
Guy and the cook, who had accused him and Dan of hooking fried pies. It occurred to him
that this was a vast improvement on being snubbed by strangers in the smoking room of a hired liner. He was a recognized part of the scheme of things on the We're Here. He had his place at the table and among the bunks. He could hold his own in the long talks on stormy days when the others were always ready to listen to what they called his fairy tales of his life ashore.
Against the blue sky. That was magnificent, in spite of Disco saying that it would break a snake's back to follow his wake. But as usual, pride ran before a fall. They were sailing on the wind with the staysail, an old one, luckily, set, and Harvey jammed her right into it to show Dan
stories of the
completely
cod
mastered.
and how they argued and reasoned on their private businesses deep down below the keel. Long Jack's taste ran more to the supernatural. He held him silent with ghostly tales of the yo-hos of Monomoy Beach that mock and terrify lonely clam diggers, of sandwalkers and dune haunters who were never
The silvery
properly
gray
buried.
kenches of well-pressed fish mounted higher and higher in the hold. No one's day's work was out of the common, but the average days were many and close together. Naturally, a man of Disco's reputation was closely watched, scrounged upon, Dan called it, by his neighbors, but he had a very pretty knack of giving them the slip through the curdling from St. Malo. The farmer had a wealthy
piece of his mind. Where might you be, eh? You don't deserve to be anywheres, you barnyard tramps go hogging the road on the high seas with no blame consideration for your neighbors and your eyes in your coffee cups instead of your
when it
silly
seemed
heads.
right and reasonable, and sat down on the deck counting the knots and getting her snarled up hinges. The Manila, she'd struck her gait, and she held out, and presently along came a tramp, and Coonahan spoke her. "Hey, you seen any fishing boats now?" says he, quite casual. There's lashing of 'em off the Irish coast," says the tramp. "Ah, go shake yourself," says Coonahan. "What I have to do with the
Here
Irish?"
out of Gloucester, 70-ton square rigger, iron built and well found. We troops, living and dead, are all around the world and the seas thereof. I don't use New York nor Boston. We may see East End Point.